I have no commercial interest or conflicts. I do have some federal funding for various work from a number of federal agencies. Next slide. So today we're going to do an overview of the remaining steps, the remaining 10 steps of the NIATEX model. Last time we went through the first 3. And so we'll go through those steps, touch on some examples from you participants of where you are in the various steps and what you've done and what you haven't done. And then we'll look deeper at questions and next steps. Next slide. So by the end of this, we want you to be able to identify again, step 4 through 10 of this change improvement model that focuses on addiction, and understand the various tools and tasks and people involved in each step. Next slide. So this will look familiar to you because we reviewed this exact slide last time. Of note, the NIATEX website is at the top of the page, which is very helpful in grabbing and pulling down some tools that we'll talk about today. And just to look at in more detail these various steps, they also have a library of quality improvement interventions that other teams they have helped do, as well as help with defining measures and tracking. There's just a lot of great resources there. So do check them out. So last week we identified a problem, or we looked at identifying a key problem, what a walkthrough looks like, and assembling a change team. And now we're going to look at the change and sustainability steps. And really the 4, 5, 6, and 7, those steps really, in my mind, you could really have planned the change with flowcharting, NGT, and assigning roles and tasks as subcategories, or plan the change as the step, and those things being on the agenda of planning the change. But those 4 kind of roll up into a bundle. And then the rapid cycle testing is the actual implementation of your intervention. And then developing a sustainability plan and completion is kind of the wrap up, like if you're going to keep it, what you're going to adjust, or you're going to go back to adapt and do another cycle. So we'll go over all of these steps. Next slide. So before we get started, I don't know if Josh, Tina, Dr. Jackson, have you ever been involved in an organization like corporate organization, or at your current facilities where you had a facilitated like change project where a consultant came in, and historically it's been like Six Sigma or Lean for Healthcare, when they kind of come in, facilitate some kind of big project that your facility was looking at. Have you done that at all?
I've never worked with any of those groups specifically.
How about you, Josh or Tina? Have you?
Tina may be able to answer that question more adequately than I, but I have not personally worked with any of those organizations that you've mentioned.
The only reason I ask is because this is going to be very repetitive. These steps are very similar, except they're kind of, frankly, they're a little more pragmatic. The steps that NIATEX gives with these facilitated groups, they actually have a leader, and they really kind of almost target you towards an answer sometimes, but this is really organic, but the steps are very similar. So with plan the change step, we, by this point, you've identified your primary aim for what you want to improve. You've done your walkthrough of the process in which that aim is impacted, and you've picked a change team of like 5 to 10 people who are going to work on this with you. And this is where like the rubber starts to meet the road, and you actually start planning what the change is going to be, how you're going to implement it, how you're going to measure it, how you're going to evaluate it. The first thing you do is get the whole change team together for your kickoff meeting. Now, as I mentioned at the start, usually these next 4 steps are together, and you do them all at this kickoff meeting, but sometimes our time doesn't allow. So they can be, and especially depending on how big your team is and what their schedules look like. So they can be fragmented, but if you can carve out the time for a couple-hour meeting for the first kickoff, that is ideal, because everybody's kind of focused and devoted in that time to plan the change that you're going to implement. If you could have your executive sponsor at this meeting, that's great too, not necessarily to stay the whole time, but to give like a pep talk and say how proud they are of the team and this is so important to the organization. And then, you know, they can leave if their time doesn't permit, but that's often a really nice addition to the kickoff meeting, knowing that there's buy-in at the executive level. And the point of this kickoff meeting is to review the project aim, which again has been defined, review the walkthrough experience that the change leader and maybe some of the change team have gone through, probably not every single member of the change team, but review that so you get agreement on this is what the process actually looks like. And then look for opportunities in that process to see if there's any other input about strengths and improvement. So this would include the change leader bringing in their walkthrough notes from when they did the walkthrough, and obviously the entire team. And before we go on, and Dr. Jackson, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Did your team, have you identified an aim that you're looking at? Like we kind of talked about that last week or last time, 2 weeks ago in this meeting. Is there a specific aim that you all have identified to focus on initially?
We're working with the Homer project, which is a project out of the University of Colorado that aims to study initiation of Suboxone in patients that are getting started virtually versus not witnessed versus witnessed. So that's kind of QI that we're currently involved in.
Okay.
Does that answer your question at all?
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at who's retained better, or is there better engagement of the different arms? Okay. Okay. So in next slide, please. All right, so flow charting, you've probably all seen this in some form or fashion. Really, it's a visual representation of the process that is included in whatever thing you're trying to improve, whatever aim you're trying to improve. So it has a definitive start point, it has a definitive end point, and it has a specific steps and decision points. Now, there are very advanced flow charting where you use specific icons, like, a square is typically a step in a process. There are arrows in between each step, which identifies the chronology of the direction, plus identifies those arrows or transition points between two steps, obviously. And then diamonds usually represent a decision point. So yes, no, they're doing well, they're not, but it defines, you make a decision and then they go one way to the next step, or if the answer is opposite, they go a different way in the process. And what NIATEX recommends, and it's very simplified kind of flow charting, is the team is all together and using either like a flip chart or Post-it notes, craft the process that the person goes through, a patient in this case, and just see if there is agreement in the team. This is what the flow chart would look like for our process at our organization. Now, if you have to kind of divvy up your time and you can, do a flow chart meeting, make sure that you all agree on the process, and then do the nominal group technique meeting, and then do the project charter, you can do it that way. But ideally, like I said initially, if you could do all of those on the same big or longer meeting, it works out very well because you're all really focused on getting the team in agreement as to what the process is and identifying bottlenecks and transitions and showing where you can intervene to improve the aim. Next slide, please. I think I have in here a diagram. So this is like just a snippet from NIATEX that shows the example of a flow chart. And you can see there's a start and an end point. And as I was saying, the squares are steps, the arrows are transitions, the diamonds are decision points of yes or no. The little kind of tiny arrows that you see Yes, those are opportunities for people to point out where you might have a weak point in the system, a weak point in the steps, and how potentially to improve those. Again, this is not, you do not have to do it this way, but it's a pretty nice, simple way to do it. There are also software packages like Visio. Now that is a Microsoft product that does flow charting, but there's also free online flowchart templates that you could use if you'd want to bring the flow chart into the group meeting, or like us, when we did our QI project, we had to meet just like we are now on Zoom. So we didn't have the benefit of being in a room together and being able to write or draft things on with a scribe. So you could flow chart it, bring it in, make sure that everybody agrees that that is truly the start and end of the process, and that all steps are defined. Did y'all do it, Northwood? Did you flow chart your process? Because I know that your first project has been focused on show rates. And did you do anything like this with flow charting the process from discharge, or frankly, probably entry into the crisis stabilization unit to the point of first appointment?
Yeah, we didn't actually implement a flow chart, even though this does look a lot more organized than just all the thoughts in my head. So that this would be much better. What we did, in fact, we kind of just ran a data pool, which showed the numbers rather than keeping track of it this way. But this does seem very, very adequate.
I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because this is exactly the reason that we're going over this, and that NIATEX went over this with us, and why everybody that is involved with any kind of these different models with facilitation use them. It's exactly what you're saying, to show organization, keep everybody on the same page, and be methodical about your program. Next slide. So this was one of the favorite in our change group. This is probably the favorite step. I will say that NIATEX came up with this nominal group technique. Other kind of models and facilitators might use different words, but basically it's a very organized brainstorming session. And it really is great about bringing teamwork to the forefront, making sure that every participant has a voice. And it also is time limited, which keeps people on track and allows progress to be made in prioritizing different interventions that you might want to try for your aim, whether your aim is, no show rates improvement, retention rate improvements, whatever it is. So the nominal is, everybody gets around the table or, on Zoom in a meeting, and there are 5 steps that are taken through an NGT cycle. And the whole change team is involved. If the executive sponsor can be there, doesn't have to be there. And so the first step is just silent brainstorming. And if you have to break up these sessions, these 4, 5, 6, 7 steps into different meetings, you would probably want people to silently brainstorm on their own and bring their ideas to the NGT meeting. But if you are all together and you're going through it as a bundle, you have your participants just for 3 minutes only. So whatever your aim is to improve show rates. What they think silently and note on a piece of paper or a Post-it note, what different ideas they have. And they come up with as many different changes, interventions as they can in that 3-minute time period. So it might be for no show rates, something like, a call before the next appointment, have a registration call before the appointment. If it's someone in the crisis unit, have them do a walk down, or have the nurse hand them specific instructions and a map to where they will go the first day, or whatever the interventions the team can think of. So they write those down in 3 minutes, as many ideas as they can come up with. And step 2 is then recording of all of the ideas. And this is not a time for debate. It's not even a time for clarification. It is merely a time to get all of the different ideas onto a board or a sheet or whatever you're using, to have it visible to the entire team. Now, if you're all together, everybody can read off their Post-it note or their list, but only one at a time. So, Katie reads one, Olivia reads one, Mark reads one, I read one, Jay reads one, and then it goes back through the cycle until there's no repetitive ideas and that there is no, and everybody's ideas have been recorded on the flip sheet or the paper or whatever you're using to keep track of. And so again, that's it. No debating. No, and sometimes people will go off on tangents. Whoever's facilitating say, nope, 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 ideas only, and go on to the next person. It really is great about the time organization of this. So then after that, once all of the ideas are on the board, then that is the time to discuss. It's not a time to debate. It's not a time to poo-poo any ideas. It's not a time to say that will never work. It's just a time to clarify any ideas that people have. So Olivia comes up with an idea of changing the process of how we do orientation. If I don't understand it, I just ask her questions. What do you mean by this? How does this work? What days would this happen? Who would run that orientation group? So clarifying questions, not anything about getting into the finances or how we don't have the staff, just defining what it is. So that takes about 4 or 5 minutes where you're discussing these ideas. And then the next step is voting. So if you're meeting online, you would go through and voting, you get to pick 3. Every participant gets to pick 3 choices in any order. They just pick 3. So Jay, of this list of 25, what do you think are the 3 best techniques to improve no-show rates? And then someone records the votes. Some scribe is recording the votes. If you're in a room together, you can use little stickers or check marks by them or little star stickers. I've seen that done. And once all the voting has taken place, which again is only 2 or 3 minutes, then you count up the scores, and that whatever gets the highest is the intervention that you test first. So it's really a democratic process to pull out ideas, to create buy-in, and it's really a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. And if there happens to be a tie, you do a runoff between the top 2. Same way, people vote in the team on the top 2. So it's a way to gain consensus in 15 to 20 minutes on what ideas they have to address whatever aim you have. Any questions about that? Josh, how did you guys come up with because you kind of had a bundled intervention. You did several things in your project to improve your show rates. How did you come up? Did you do something like this to come up with the ideas to implement, or was it some other way?
Yeah, we kind of have the privilege of working very closely with each other down here in our department, and we meet weekly at least. We were having our weekly MAT clinics, and a lot of the time we're able to discuss these ideas within those times. So it gets back to the scheduling aspect of it, getting everybody in the same room at the same time, which is very, very difficult to do. So we utilize those times to discuss these things, and we kind of just came up with we came up with what we discussed last week, and it basically went right along with all of this. Other than the voting, we didn't really do a vote, but that could be something that we could absolutely do. But ultimately, the change team we have it's pretty much myself, Tina, Dr. Corder, our executive sponsor, Jeremy Sagan, and Joel Baker. So there's about 5 of us, and that's about the only time you can get us all in a room at the same time, anytime during the week. So that's when we usually talk about MAT and QI and what have you.
Okay, so you did kind of a modified version of this. You just didn't do it, like you said, in the voting fashion. One other question I had about yours is, again, you did like kind of there were several steps, several interventions for change. Did you at any point think about just testing one at a time, or did you decide to put them together and do them? Like, how was that decision made?
Yeah, it was kind of a bundled deal there. I came up with the one idea that led into another, that led into another, that led into another. So it was, if A works, then I got to go to B, then I have to go to C, then I have to go to D. So it wasn't really, we did it chronologically. So they're all the steps are kind of interconnected or intertwined. So I wouldn't be able to do this step without doing this one, or this step without doing this one. So we just made sure that it was all intersecting and connected.
Gotcha. Next slide.
Hey, Tony, just before we move, I want to point to Katie's comment about the NGT that, it's her favorite part. No one's ideas are immediately struck down,
Yeah,
when you go through that phase.
I really liked that part, that everybody got a chance to say something and people were going to see, oh, whatever idea I share is going to be heard and appreciated. And I just really liked that part.
Yeah, and I mean, for myself and some like Sheena and some others, we're not, clinicians by trade, so we're not doing the day-to-day that the other people in the group were. So to give our ideas, hopefully help them have ideas, because we didn't know much, but to be able to put your ideas down and have them be heard was nice, because hopefully it got the juices flowing.
Yes, exactly. I really liked that part.
Yeah, and that's a key part of the technique, that you don't shoot. There is no bad idea. There is no bad idea. That has to be one of the values that the team comes in with. And it really is a nice process. All right, so you have voted. You've already known coming in what your aim was, to reduce no-show rates, to increase show rates, to improve 30-day retention, whatever your aim is that has been dictated by the team. You have picked your first intervention to trial, and now you are going to create a charter basically for the change. Again, NIATEX has a really nice form that you can use, but it doesn't have to be NIATEX's form. The goal for this part of the project is to get down who's going to do what on the change team, what each person's responsibility is, and also to specifically commit to that aim, get it in kind of a SMART format, meaning it's very specific, it's very measurable, and it's time limited. This is an important part, very important part of defining the time for this change. And that will really depend on how long or how involved your intervention is. If it's a really, kind of like what Josh did, what we did at WVU for our first NIATEX change project or QI change project, it wasn't just a simple to see if we improve ambulatory show rates, we're going to do a telephone call the day before to confirm appointment. That's a pretty simple thing. And depending on how many patients you have a week, you could probably see if that makes an impact if you have a ton of patients a week, you could do it in 1 week. It might take 2 or 3, but if it's a more expansive kind of project, it might take a while longer, and also depends on the volume that you have. So it could be anywhere from, the cycle could be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to 3 months. I don't know, with rapid cycle quality improvement, you'd really want to go more than 3 months, because that's really not the intent of QI. Certainly research goes longer than that, but it has a very stringent protocol when you're doing actual research. This is rapid cycle quality improvement. So you're setting the start and end time. Your aim statement should be very specific. We're going to increase retention at 30 days from our baseline, which is 50%, expecting a 20% improvement by the end of each quarter. And you want to live by that aim statement. And then you also want to, and this is so important, and it can make or break a project, define your metric to collect or monitor. And this can be really hard. Over the past 3 years, I have met with a ton of people discussing, what does retention mean? What does that look like? What is the definition? What is the numerator and the denominator? Is it a monthly retention rate? Is it a rolling average? If it's a rolling average, how many months are you looking at? So know how you're going to measure it, and also know how easy it's going to be to collect. If you have a great electronic health record that has awesome reports that are already set up that you can extract, that makes it so easy. But frankly, that doesn't often happen. So you have to have someone that's assigned to the data collection that's extracting those numerators and denominators for the metric by hand. And that can take a while. So really pounding out what your data equation is, what your metric measurement is, where you can find it in the chart or wherever, who is going to do that, how often are you going to get together and look at that number? And when is your end date? When do you determine if this has been a success, this needs to be adapted, or we're going to adopt it permanently? The other thing is prediction or forecasting of how much your intervention you want it to change. So if Josh's show rates at Northwood were 50% in 8 weeks, they expect their intervention, that their change that they're implementing, to improve that show rate by 20 percentage points. So they expect to go from 50 to 70 in 8 weeks. And that point, 8 weeks, is when they measure it and say, yay, nay, tweak. So there also is these Pdsa cycles, these rapid cycles. You can tweak in the middle of your intervention. Unlike research, you're going to look at plan, do, study, act as you're implementing, looking for secondary variables to inform your project if you need to tweak it in the middle of your cycle. Next slide, please. So Pdsa, plan, do, study, act. The intervention, you know what you're going to collect, you know what the data is, you know what your prediction is, you know what your time limit is. That's the plan part. The do part is the actual carrying out of the project. You should meet with your team. You shouldn't, say it's a 3-month project. That 3 months, that's your measurement date to see the difference between baseline and current. You want to meet with your change team as often as you determine is appropriate in between those cutoff dates, because that's the point where I was just saying that people could bring to the team, you know what, this isn't working exactly right. I think we need to change the order in which we do these interventions, or we need to bring someone else in and inform them or educate them about this intervention because we don't have consistency between team members. So that's what happens in these intermittent meetings between your start and your final cutoff. You're bringing your observations that have been noted and recording data throughout the whole time. Then when you finally do reach that end date, you are all together and you analyze the data, looking at what you predicted and where you actually are, what was learned, what secondary gains or secondary costs did you have, for example, and this is really important too. I think we're all dealing with staffing shortages, and a new project, I think it's very important to include as a secondary observation the impact it's having on your staff. Are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they complaining to you about this new process? Are they having to enter a lot more stuff in the chart that's slowing them down? Or are they noticing secondary gains, like in our project, for example, which was a new orientation group to kind of go over the policies and procedures of COAT? When patients finally did get into their regular weekly group, there was a lot less questions, or if there was a problem that they didn't follow a policy or a procedure, there wasn't as much fight back, with, I didn't know that. They did know, and it made it much more smooth for the people that assumed the patients after orientation. So that was a positive secondary observation that our team had. So as anybody that's involved in the actual process, they should be recording observations and bringing it back to the team. Now, you may need to tweak and do another cycle if you have not reached your goal of improving retention rates by 20 percentage points, or lowering your no-show rates by 15% or whatever your defined goal was. And if that's the case, you go back to the drawing board, and that list of interventions that you had from your nominal group technique, you could add other interventions, but then you add that one in, you continue what you were doing and add another one in until you set the time limit and see if you've reached that goal of getting whatever your aim is to the point where you want it. Alternatively, you can say that this is just not working and we need to go back to the drawing board completely, and we need to scrap the intervention that we tried to implement because it was too burdensome on the staff, it was having no impact whatsoever, or, it was too cost prohibitive for whatever reason that you didn't project when you started the project. So that is where you will adopt, adapt, or abandon your change. Did you have to do any tweaking, Josh, in your process? Did you at any point say like this is how we thought it would work and it didn't work that way, so we're tweaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think with any new project, you're going to run into those things. And when we first started doing it, the communication was the barrier there. And once the communication got ironed out, things started to go a little bit more smoothly. But yeah, there were some bumps in the road in the beginning before everything got off to where it is now, and we're dramatically increasing with retention, which is great. But yeah, there were absolutely bumps in the road along the way where we had to, talk to certain people, make sure everybody was on the same page. Like I said, communication was a major barrier, but we were eventually able to resolve that, and things are up and good to go again.
So, and remind me, what was your baseline show rate?
A baseline show, I'll have to pull that up. Yeah, we started our baseline. Let's see. Baseline was at 68.7% of outpatient ambulatory starts.
And what goal had you set when you did your plan?
We wanted to go 80%. We wanted to get in the
Okay.
80th percentile, and we ended up surpassing that. And it is as of today, it's in the 88th percentile.
Oh, fabulous. And what was your timeline? Like how long was your test cycle?
We started with 3 months, and then we're going to gradually went to 6 months, and then just kind of, I think 6 months was a good place to start. Whenever we see people come in and there isn't that I guess that bridge from the outpatient ambulatory to the first initial medication check, their first appointment, that was kind of one of the things we ran into as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, next slide. So, I mean, you've exceeded in your initial project your anticipated projected forecasted goal with tweaks that you did with your rapid cycle improvement, and you're now at the 88th percentile. For that project, obviously you want to sustain those successes, and that is also where a lot of projects end up petering out, because you sustain short-term improvements, but you don't implement things that will continue those gains. And then people's attention is diverted to a different project or a different priority, and everything that you've put in is lost. So it's really important, even in the early planning stages before you implement, is considering how you're going to sustain the plan. Oftentimes it's just keeping it in everybody's focus. Like everybody still is looking at that number, whether it's through a data dashboard. So, it's easily seen that we're in the 88th percentile month to month. And then if you see it dropping, you can take rapid action to identify, what happened. Was there something new that happened environmentally? Was there a new provider? Did we have, some kind of new law that changed or something? Was there an issue with getting medication, a pharmacy closed, or, just if you do that timely, you can identify bumps in the road. But to continue to keep that data in everybody's forebrain is important. Otherwise, often you lose sustainability. So you are at a point where you have exceeded your forecast. And how many months has it been? Has it been 6 months now?
Yes, it's actually been 7 now. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you had good project. You met your goal and you actually exceeded your goal. So, I presume that you've adopted that permanently, these changes that you've made.
Yeah, it's something that we still consistently do, and we still consistently see an uptick in outpatient ambulatory segueing into the first actual medication check. We're seeing an influx in people in our MAT programming. I believe we were from Mega and Megan's projections, we were predicted to have, I think, 107 by this time next year, and we're already at 105. So we're doing fairly well. But I know I talked to Megan about this last week. You know, whenever we hit that 107, the next projection is going to be, okay, you're going to have to reach 125 by this time next year. So as we progress, we know those numbers and those expectations are going to increase as well.
It always, the bar always moves, but that's what quality improvement is, right? I mean, we always strive for the next gain. Do you, have you looked at the like financial impact of, you know, because at the end, like looking at your gains include looking at how that impacted you process-wise, financial, and outcome-wise. Has that been evaluated, like what impact it has on financial stability of the organization?
Finances are a little bit out of my wheelhouse. That's more for our executive sponsor, Jeremy Sagan. He kind of deals with all that kind of stuff. So I haven't seen any solidified numbers or anything like that, other than the data that we've been given regarding the clients. But I haven't seen anything financially.
Well, I would guess that if there was a financial impediment or you were losing money on that, Jeremy would tell you right away that this.
Oh yeah.
But and so in your orientation for new employees, like what have you done anything to create a sustainability plan for your new process? Like, do you have it as part of orientation for new hires? Is it just cemented in everybody's brain about the new process, or have you addressed sustainability at all for your new intervention?
Yeah, it's kind of just grown organically over since we implemented it in the beginning. We haven't had any new hires to bring on to, you know, speak with about it. But if I were to, or Tina actually would be the one to talk to about that. So if Tina, you want to take that one over, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, I think Josh is right. It's just kind of become an organic part of how we do things. We're always looking at what also is impacting that number of people who don't make it to, you know, the first. Right now, we're looking at our meth epidemic and how that's impacting our MAT program as well. And as far as the money issues, one thing I can address is that we do look at billing hours for the MAT program and things like that. So don't have hard numbers, but I can tell you our billing hours have been, you know, just steadily going up and then kind of sustaining for a period of time and then going up and then sustaining. So we haven't seen sharp drops in our billing hours. So that tells us that the program is absolutely sustaining itself well.
That's fabulous, because there's nothing worse than doing a great change and having improved patient outcomes, but it hitting the financial bottom line worse than before, which, you know, can be devastating for the clinical team, for the people taking care of patients. So obviously that's a win-win when an intervention impacts the bottom line in a positive way and also impacts patient outcomes in a positive way, in which a team is not overwhelmed, overburdened, or does not like or buy into the change that happened. So sustainability is a big part of any project that you're going to be doing, because if you've been successful as you have been, you want to keep those gains. Next slide, please. So when you're done with your project, you've decided to, you've gone beyond adapting to meet your aim or goal of getting to the 80th percentile. You are in the phase of adoption. You have figured out how to sustain that plan regardless of the players in the system. This is your new policy and flow for how patients that are discharged from the crisis unit enter into ambulatory treatment. It is just part of everyday practice. You now can share and tell the story of how you achieve that, including sharing statistics, absolutely with the executive leadership team or community members or other change project colleagues. And NIATEX recommends this 5x5 presentations 5 slides in 5 minutes. And Mark talked about this last week. Everybody on the change team should be able to speak to that presentation because you've had buy-in throughout the whole process. So obviously, the executive sponsor has been kept abreast of the progress throughout the change project, but this is a time that you want the executive sponsor to be like in the room, involved with the change leader and change team, and actually hear the results along with anybody else who's impacted positively by your valuable change and the valuable outcomes that you have achieved. Have you done like a little 5x5 presentation, put it together in like a 5-slide PowerPoint yet? Because you should.
Yeah, I haven't personally done that yet. I've put a packet together that kind of gives the briefing of the actual project that we could project retention, but we haven't actually put a 5x5 presentation into play yet. We share we didn't actually put it on paper, but everybody's very aware of the success that we're having, including our executive sponsor. He's kind of giving us the autonomy to do what it is we need to do, and because he sees it's working. So yeah, we do report to him regarding, where we're at on a certain, whenever we reach a certain milestone or we reach a certain goal or what have you. But I know we have not put together a 5x5 presentation or anything of that nature yet.
You know what I was just thinking when you were talking is that probably would be, there's SOR meetings with the state. What a great little presentation that would be of what, the QI that you've implemented and what your outcomes are. And not only would they be impressed by, giving you money and look what you've done, but also other people in those meetings could see that process, see what you did and learn and integrate it potentially into their program. So think about, I think that, I don't know about Mark and the other members of the team, I think that would be great for one of those meetings.
I absolutely agree.
So the more work for you, Josh.
Yeah, I'll I'll be sure to put something together.
All right, next slide. Okay, so we've gone over steps 4 through 10 in the NIATEX steps. I want to invite other members of the QI team, if they've been making notes through the presentation, about any additional insights before Jay gives us the next steps. Anybody want to add anything about the steps 4 through 10 and additional thoughts?
You touched on this, and I think it was the last session that that you or Mark touched on it. I apologize, I can't remember, but just the regular checking in with the team. It's almost better to sort of check in with each other too much as opposed to not enough, because then time can kind of go by and where we could be changing some interventions.
Yeah.
Great presentation, Tony. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everybody's busy. And even if your meetings through the Pdsa cycle are 10 minutes, that's just a high point of the data. Anything wrong? Do we need to adapt anything? It is very helpful to stay engaged with one another, to identify when things, like I said, if the numbers start to fall, is there something in the past week or 2 weeks, whenever it was since we've met, that has changed environmentally that has nothing to do with the care we're providing, but just, there was a major snowstorm and this week we had lower show rates. Well, that makes sense, but, staying on top of that is really helpful in the long run. And it's so easy to get away from that, because that's what everybody talks about, quality improvement. Every organization wants it. But carving out time, especially time when you have a calendar that's full of other things, can be really difficult.
Yes, so well said. And that's a thing that Sheena does that is so incredibly helpful, selfishly for me, is that she will send out the agenda. So our team meets every Thursday and she'll send out the agenda on the Monday or Tuesday of that week. And it's very clear, black and white. Here's what we talked about last time. Here was sort of everybody's assignments for the week. Here's the agenda for this week. And for me, that keeps me focused on schedule. Inevitably, I'm trying to do 87 other clinical things while I'm trying to work on this QI project. And so thankfully for her, she keeps those agendas keep me organized and focused. And that way, in case I've forgotten to do something, which happens, it's a great reminder for the upcoming meeting.
I'm glad it's helpful.
Sheena or Megan or Mega, anything you want to say about data collection?
Try to make it as simple as possible, but as helpful as possible. But
It is
early
hard.
on, data collection is important and frequent and
Consistency.
yeah, consistency. And
Mark,
reviewing it
anything?
regularly with the team.
And that's something our team is looking at, like making sure that we have a set agenda item of data every single time. Mark, is there anything that you would like to add about any of the steps 4 through 10?
So just, thanks, Tony. I would just say that overall, that it's worth some time investment to build this kind of structure and organization into what you're doing. Because, I mean, I don't think very few people love administrative, just kind of filling out spreadsheets and a few people live for that, but, right, Megan? But anyway,
Yeah.
the more structure you put in up front, the more likely it is that it'll keep you on track. And that's really the goal. You don't want to do too much, but you just want to have enough structure and organization to keep you on track and to keep you going. And particularly as the organization grows or the amount of work that you have to do grows, it just helps you stay focused and on there. And feel free to cut it back when you don't need it. But to begin with, a little more is probably a little better. And see how it goes. And if it keeps you on track and it's built in as part of the process, you don't need it anymore. But to start with, a little more structure is probably better than too little.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, Jay, is there any questions, Dr. Jackson or Tina or Josh, anything about any of those steps? And again, do check out the NIATEX website because there's like really great tools and information and interventions and measures. They give examples of measures for different kind of aims that you may have. Because retention still is a tricky one. 30-day retention, do you count that as, how many patients have come to 5 visits or more? Do you count it as people in the program on day 1 of the month versus day 28 or 30 for the month? I mean, it does get a little tricky. Okay, Jay, do you want to talk about what the next steps are?
Sure. Thanks again, Tony. Appreciate the presentation. So for the next session in 2 weeks, you will stop hearing presentations from Tony and Mark and, the Northwood group. Mark's applauding. I am as well. I'm just doing it in my head. But we're going to transition to having the sites do some presentations on their QI project ideas. So first up is Northwood. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick. I know we're coming up on the hour, but I want to show you the form that you'll get in the recap here. But it's a pretty basic case form. It's just a PowerPoint slide, so hopefully it's easy for you guys just to put your information in there. But just breaks down kind of the process a little bit as far as just the basics. And what we would challenge the Northwood team, because you guys have done this great project already, is to think about what's next. What's the next project? Okay, so how are you going to build on what you've done, do something completely different, whatever it is. But try to just put some information, some background information in each one of these sections. But also that questions box here is the big one. What questions do you have for the team? The team's here to answer, help provide guidance, hopefully give you some next steps, and all that good stuff. So really take advantage of it, while you got everybody around the table. So this is what we're asking you to do in 2 weeks. That's going to be the session. We're just going to focus on this, have a great discussion. And then we're going to ask community care to do the same thing. And then after you guys. So that's the next steps. So be thinking about it. Josh, Tina, I'm going to send this to you. If you have any questions at all, please let us know. beforehand, and you don't have to send it to me until like Monday, that day you're presenting it. If that's how long it takes, whatever, that's okay. But just send it to me whenever you have it done.
Hey, Jay, are we just sending
Hmm?
you this form or are we putting it into some sort of presentation?
So if you want to be, extra credit, you can make a presentation for sure. I mean, at the very least, send us back the form. But listen, I don't, spread your wings, Josh, and just let it go.
I was afraid
That'd be
to
my
ask.
recommendation.
I figured you'd say something like that. So,
Yeah.
would the form suffice for now or?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's just really to get, like ideally you would present the form, like I'll share it on the screen and you present it and it takes you 5 to 10 minutes max. And then we're really having a discussion about what you can do to actually implement or get things going down this track of implementing the project. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a huge, 30-minute presentation with slides. No, it doesn't have to be that. If you want to give supplemental information, that's great.
All right.
So it's your call.
That's good enough for me. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up the session? All right, hearing none, we will adjourn. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, great job, Tony. Thank everybody.
See ya.